Second week of Six Sigma Black Belt. Let's talk a little bit about project management. We do have a project in this class. So we're going to be talking about project management, and you're saying, well, why are we talking about project management in Six Sigma? Well, Six Sigma is actually a process for improving your process. You know, the DMAIC, the DMAIC process. So it's a process optimization process. So it's a process looking at processes. And it's like a contest, see how many times you can say process. But that's all about. It's a process for improving processes. So in the sense that project management then becomes very fundamental to Six Sigma, this is how you're going to get your projects done. And what is a good process? It's systematic. It's a method for understanding, controlling, and improving, optimizing the business results. Again, Six Sigma focuses on business results. And basically this came about, it's been around for a while. Deming first talked about it in the 1920s, 1930s. And he says, well, basic quality and continuous improvement is important. It's about process inputs, controls, and outputs. They're all related to each other. What goes in affects what comes out. And he likes statistical methods, which give organizations the ability to make improvements and control processes. You don't have to look at everything. You have to take a sample, and from that sample, then you can make a educated, data-based decision. And then you look at it, you make a change, you need feedback to make sure that your products and your processes are actually better. It did what you thought it was going to do. Process management is about understanding your process. I'm going to talk specifically to Six Sigma. Understanding your process, controlling your process so it doesn't vary a whole lot. Where the thought is if you have good, robust processes, the output will be automatically good. It just follows. And finally, improving. And a guy named Joseph Durand had 3 dimensions for metrics. You got to measure the effectiveness. So you have to provide value is what he's looking for here. Are we satisfying the customer? Efficiency. How well we're doing it. Are we taking care of our stockholders? Are we making a profit? Can we do it at the least cost? And finally, adaptability. As anybody that's known in the stock market, you can't know what the future holds. So you got to be flexible both now in the present and also in the future when things change. So the way traditionally organizations are formed as they do by organization. These are called silos. It's another way of just saying they live in their own little world and they don't interact with the other divisions. So for example, when I was in engineering, I'm down here in Arkansas. Sales and marketing was up in Minnesota someplace. Admin finance was up in Minnesota. Operations was in all over the different states. Human resources was, we were all scattered and we didn't interact much. We all just lived in our own little worlds. Okay. Now if you're going to do a process, you got to look at all levels. You got to break those silos. And this is just a chart I pulled up from off the internet. But basically start a process and how does the thing flow to the output. This is product or service. I'll give you a second with this. See if it makes sense. The first step of improving a process is to understand your process. So this is what we call the SIPOC model, supplier, input, process, outputs, customers. And I threw up this graphic. What it does is it says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to list down who are our suppliers, what are their inputs, and what is the process steps. If you're at the process level, you're going to spend a lot of time here, process maps and things like that. And then you look at your outputs, and then you get customers. And an important part of this, again, is you got to get the feedback. So at each level. So your inputs, you look at that and you give feedback to your supplier. Process, you go inputs and suppliers. And ultimately your customer gives feedback about the end product. Michael Harry of Motorola fame, he was smart enough to realize there are processes within processes. And I'll do a quick example on a service level. Business level, what does it take to satisfy the customer? That's very, very, very overview. But operations level, you want to talk to the customer. So the process might be somebody calls in to the insurance company and starts talking about their problem. The receptionist then sends it to the appropriate person. The appropriate person answers it. He gets an output for the customer, and the customer gives feedback. Okay. Within that process, what happens at the receptionist desk? phone rings, process to answer it within two rings. The receptionist asks several questions. The receptionist uses this grid to determine where it goes to. So you see that at the very level, the receptionist level, where she's taking that call, she's got her own little process, which feeds into a bigger process, which ultimately feeds into the business process. Now what Michael did is he says, okay, we're going to add to this. Instead of just have the DMAC, you see that embedded here, we're going to add R and an S and an I, which stands for reorganize, standardize, and integrate. So at the business level, what you want to do is recognize what's the true state of your business, define what plans do you have to do to improve that state, measure your business right now, analyze the gaps, improve the systems, improve performance goals, and then you want to standardize the systems so you're best in class, world class, and then you want to integrate that throughout your organization. And then if we come back down to the operations level, this is where you're making the product or providing the service. What are the operational issues? Again, you want to link that to the business system, define the projects for Six Sigma, measure the Six Sigma projects, analyze, improve, control, standardize again for best in class at the organization level, and integrate it not only just in your organization but throughout the business itself. And find that at the process level, this is in the trenches here, you want to look at the functional problems that link to operational issues. So it could be you need a different tool, you need a better technology, whatever that is. Then we got the define, measure, analyze, improve, control, standardize, and then again integrate it across the entire organization. Every organization, every company, every group has stakeholders, and stakeholders are people that have an interest in the company, in the business. These are the stockholders, customers, suppliers, management, employees, families, communities, and society as a whole. And you've got to consider each one of those, right, when you're doing something. Again, what are the stakeholder interests, and what are their, how are you going to address those interests? And they interact with each other too. So it's kind of complicated, but it has to be done. So what do you have to consider for stakeholder? Well, you got the short term or long term. And this varies from culture to culture. For us in America, it's generally 7 years. When I worked at Bosch, they wanted to know our 20-year plan. Well, okay. But it's all different. You got to look at both the short term and long. What are you going to do tomorrow, and what are you going to do 20 years from now? Profit. The thing that every business has to do is make money. It has to stay in business, and that's the best way to take care of the employees and the other stakeholders, is to make a profit. Without that, you don't exist. And again, we're looking at efficiency, the cycle times, what resources do you need, and fine, what does the customer, what does the market think about what you just did, and how do you address that? And you get that feedback, and you really go back and look at the rest of it and adjust. This is that adaptability. Oh my, benchmarking, this is so important. You want to compare yourself to the world class, the best in class. There's a story, and I think it's true, is when Xerox VP of marketing came in with an ad from a rival's copying machine ad, and they were making a copier that was, they're selling it cheaper than Xerox could even make it. So right away Xerox knew they had some issues, right? They used to own the copier business. Now they don't do it so much. But you want to benchmark everything, right? Your processes, your performance, how your projects are going, how's your strategic benchmarking, how are you doing in the big market, right? And there's a very specific sequence we're going to cover in the next slide. I'll give you a second to read this. Again, so what do we benchmark? Everything, absolutely everything. Process, how are you doing it in the trenches? Performance, how are those processes working compared to other? What's your efficiency? Again, those three things that Duran said. How's your project doing? And what's the big old strategic plan? They're all linked. The Japanese have a term called Hoshin Kenri, and I'm not going to cover that here, but basically it links everything at every different level. That's what you want to do. And old Joseph, he had an opinion about everything, but he had this 7-step benchmarking process, right? So what he would do is preparation and planning. And he says, well, what's going to actually get the results we need? And there's the American Productivity and Quality Council in Houston that has done studies for years and years and years. Top 3 haven't changed a bit. Price, that's always an attraction. Quality, they want it to work the way it's supposed to work. And service, they want to be taken care of. Those 3 things impact the market the most. So you start collecting data, you analyze it, you report on it, and then you learn, you improve, and then you spread across the organization, right? You want to be world class. Ultimately, the world class is going to win. 2 questions we want to know. Are we doing the right things? Is this the stuff that the customer wants? And are we doing those things, the right things? Are we doing the right things? In other words, are we doing it the best we possibly can? And I chose this graphic. I really like it. If you look at that on every level of this thing, you see financial. Again, you're not taking care of your stakeholders. You're not doing anybody any favors unless you're making an impact on the market. Ultimately, you got to be making a profit. Take a look at this. It should just make sense. The inputs, that comes from our SWOT analysis. Outputs, what are they doing? And then outcomes, right? And if you look at the process and activities, that's where you're looking for your projects. That's where you get the projects. And again, you can do that on the SWOT. What are your weaknesses? Those always make good projects. Yeah, I've been in an organization, we're going to talk about metrics here. I've been in organizations where they have gazillions and gazillions of metrics. They measure everything, right? Man, if you get more than 20 at the business level, you probably can't manage it very well. And again, you want to take all your stakeholders, all right? You want to link them all together. You want to say, how did we do in the past? How are we doing right now? And what about the future? What will this buy for us? When Motorola, when they designed a cell phone and they skipped a generation, basically they could predict what the size of the next cell phone was. So they skipped that size and went to the size after that. They took over the market. And you want multiple metrics. I worked for a company, they were paid bonuses on return on investments, return on assets. And basically, the higher that was, they were up about 200%, which is incredible. But what they did is they did that by not buying the assets. No long-term capital. If you couldn't pay it back in a year, they didn't buy it, right? So they got their bonuses, but you try to compete with 30, 40-year-old machines, you can't do it. And you want the metrics to be consistent, right? Don't keep changing them. And you want to combine them all. You don't want to just look at that one. You want to combine the overall performance indices. So you can actually, I used to be able to model, that was one of my jobs, is to look at hydraulics and pneumatics today and look at the market trends and predict how busy we're going to be the next month. And you want it to be adaptable. You want it to evolve, right? You want your metrics to have meaning for you. If you're not using them, get rid of them. If you need metrics and you don't have them, bring them on in. And again, you got to set targets and goals. And again, this comes from the benchmarking, right? That's one of my favorite questions when I used to go and do the Baldrige examinations. How do you determine your targets and goals? And what will that do if you hit them? You'd be surprised how many people just kind of, made it up. So what Duran said about metrics, he says they have to be standardized. You want to compare apples to apples. So if you're saying how long it takes to close out a case, in this case of insurance, health insurance, you want it to be the same in Arkansas as it is in Tennessee, as it is in New York, as it is in Virginia. So you can have the same metric. Is it closed out, when you pay the customer? Is it closed out when you complete the paperwork? It's got to be the same. And again, you want to do management by fact, right? These metrics have to be able to use them to make key decisions. They have to have some kind of meaning. They got to be worthwhile. I mean, yeah, it's nice to know what everybody's favorite color of tissue is, but is it worthwhile? Is it really important? Okay, they got to be easy to collect. You don't want to spend full time just trying to get metrics and trying to get that. They got to be easy. And again, benchmarking, compare it to others within the organization and world class. I'm going to say it again: price, quality, and service right? So how much is, if a guy eats pizza, how much is that worth over the lifetime of that pizza eater? That's $8,000 into that business's pocket, right? So if you destroy that, say he orders pizza, wants it delivered, and it takes 3 hours to get it there. Well, guess what? You just lost a big chunk of that 8,000. Price, quality, service. A little over 20 years ago, a guy named Kaplan and his friend Norton said there's a balanced scorecard. In other words, these are things that will keep your business without looking at one metric. Things that you have to look at and do well in order to succeed as a business. First of all, financially, how do you appear? Return on investment, cash flow, things like that, sales backlog. How do our shareholders think about this? You got your internal. These are what processes must we be good at? Reduce rework, cycle times, setup times, these types of things. Again, it's kind of efficiency. Learning and growth. How do we change and improve? How are we able to learn and get better at it? So you got employee surveys, employee suggestions, training. Again, you just keep on getting better. And customers, how do we appear to the customers? How do we look as a customer? I work for a company. Unfortunately, we look like a I don't know how to say, but kind of like the dime store version of hydraulics. And I worked for another company. We were looked as the premium of that. And again, how do you appear to the customers? Customer surveys, complaints. What's your market share? These types of things. But you look at all these things, right? And you try to make sure they're all balanced. I've thrown out some financial metrics. These are typical. Return on assets. So how much do you have and how much you making off the stuff you own? Return on investment. So I spent $1,000. How much am I getting back? Am I getting $1,200 back? Am I getting $2,000 back? Am I getting $700? This is return on investment. Net present value. It's a technique for taking costs in the future and bringing it into the present and looking at it. Internal rate of return. That's the self-calculations. This is how much I spent. This is how much I made off it. I can calculate the rate of return. And Excel can do all these for us automatically. And I'm going to show you some films in the readings that will show you how to do these. And finally, payback, which is how long is it going to take to pay this thing back for what I spend in it. Now, this is a cost. Usually it starts as the cheapest way, prevention costs, up to the most expensive. That's an external failure cost. So prevention costs, these are things like design reviews, quality designs, planning, pilot projects, field testing, things like that very cheap to do, relatively cheap, that you do. Okay. And then you get into appraisal costs. These are the audits. This is like the final inspection, prototype inspection, lab testing, test equipment maintenance. These are things that will help you avoid failures. And the internal, these are like how many accidents you have. I'm just going to use a people one: scrap, redesign, reinspection, downtime, employee turnover, these types of things. These are all internal failure costs. And you get into the worst kind, external failure costs, bad debts, too much inventory, reinspection, restocking costs, retesting, rework, returns, scrap, sorting, warranty expense, liability. All these things come from external failure costs. These are expensive. In fact, as you move from one level, prevention appraisal, it goes up by an order of magnitude. So a failure in the field could be 100 to 1,000 times more expensive than a prevention cost. Now in the readings, what I've got is a couple of links. If you go into that one link, I think you'll see something that's very similar to what I've just presented. Take a look at it. This is that Indian company, the consulting company. Take a look at it. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. Thanks.